So from left to right, I'm just going to introduce everybody. We have Jordan Sparks, founder and executive director of Sparks Brain Preservation. That's a new organization that's come out recently out of the closet, so to speak. Doesn't go to these kinds of events very often, so we're very happy to have you. We have James Arrowood, Alcor CEO, Emil Kendziorra, CEO and founder of Tomorrow Biostasis, and we have Jessica Radley here, the CEO of Nectome, and Micah Mills, CEO and founder of Cryopets. And our host, Marty, co-founder of the Cryosphere Foundation, and my friend. Max, take it away.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to start by, first, I'd like to say that I think it's fantastic that cryonicists, biostasis people have so many choices now, so many good choices in the field. I think it's wonderful to have both competition and cooperation of all the right kinds, and we're seeing a lot more of that recently than we've seen in a long time. I think we're seeing some very interesting things happening in the industry. So what I'd like to do is go from one side to the other and have everybody get a few minutes for everybody to explain what their organization does, and importantly, if somebody is interested in this space, why should they be interested in the services that your organization offers over the other choices that are available, or choices for their pets in certain cases. So, Jordan, would you start us off?
Hi. Our organization has been around for 20 years and was recently renamed. It started off as Oregon Cryonics, and we've been gradually ramping up that whole time. We started actually pursuing members about a year or two ago. We're up to 80 members now. So we have a few unique things. We do mostly brain only and chemical preservation. So we think that chemical preservation with formaldehyde is superior to cryopreservation. And then the other big thing that we're doing is we're opening up locations around the United States. So our main facility is in Salem, Oregon. It's huge. But we're also opening up 7 locations around the United States. So we already have buildings in Oakland, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, New York, and we're trying to get Miami and Georgia. I can't remember the name of that city. So Atlanta, thank you. So if we get locations in all of those cities, we're within driving distance of 84% of the population in the United States. And that's huge. Getting there quickly is a really important thing, and driving is much better than flying. And you can rotate people in and out, and every spot will have full-time staff with ambulance. So that's our big push at the moment.
Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm James with Alcor. I'm not going to take the bait on this one. Meaning, I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you we're better than or anything like that. We're different than. You know, I think what Jordan's doing is different. Chemical fixation is different. Emil's got Europe, I think, pretty well wrapped up in a good way, hopefully. And a different approach. You know, he's got the ambulance approach. We have kind of a personnel approach. So I think everybody, particularly in this space, is smart enough and, frankly, probably libertarian enough to exercise free will and look at the differences and say, this works best for me, or this works best for where I'm at. And unlike perhaps my former reputation, I'm not adverse to that. Like, you need stratifications in markets, you need pickup trucks, and you need sedans, and you need sports cars, and you need different things. In terms of what Alcor's trying to do in the space, we're the turtle. I want to be the turtle. I don't want to, you know, go out and do a bunch of big stuff and then all of a sudden, poof, because that's happened a lot in the space. Historically, if you look back on it, you know, and we're in a weird time frame, I think, particularly for Cryonics, which is good but bad, right? Because this audience should be 100 times bigger, right? So we're not there yet. We haven't crossed the Rubicon yet. But we are in a space where we're getting mainstream scientists, mainstream media to take it seriously. And I think that's even happened the last 2 or 3 years since I've been involved. So that's all really good, right? But what I don't want is, and this is perhaps a poor cultural reference, but bum fights. You know, there's a limited pool of resources, there's a limited approach group here, and we have different ways of approaching a problem. That's good. That's good in a market. Alcor, I think to the extent that we have positives, those positives are longevity. We're in the longevity business. Alcor's 50 plus years. We have very well organized, you know, financial and business and legal structures to protect our patients and to move us into the future. And that's my focus, right? As the turtle, I want to keep very slowly in a calculated way setting up different structures, different entities, different places. And, you know, Jordan's model may be great. I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea to cover 84% of the population with an option. You know, that's a good thing for the field and the space. So good for him. And Emil, you know, again, he's got Europe, and he's doing well with that. And I guess, you know, there may be some overlap, so fine. But Alcor's big thing is we do it a certain way, and we've done it that way for 50 plus years, and we're going to keep doing it. And we're going to be around in 50 years because we've got a great board and great members and a great structure. And you know, that's all I have to say about it.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. So we started out in Europe, as most of you might know, right? We only cover Europe and US, right? So if you should definitely sign up with other organizations if you're in Asia or somewhere else around the world, right? Because we don't cover these areas at all. We do this because, as Jordan said, like this timing is very, very important, right? And we want to make sure, so we initially set out, we only want to cover areas where we can honestly say that we can do an equal and or better job than anybody else, right? And in Europe, I would say that has been true for a long time, and in the US now, in certain states, I would also argue that's becoming true. We do have this, what I wouldn't call it an ambulance approach. We have a lot of ambulances. We have now, we soon will have 5 locations together with partners in the US, Florida, California. There will be a second one in California, actually here in the Bay Area, New York, and Texas, among other things, collaborating with the guys from Cryopet. And in Europe, we have 7 ambulances right now. By and large, so we're an organization based on 2 parts, right? We have an operative organization called Tomorrow Bio, and then we have a long-term storage foundation based in Switzerland that is a non-profit foundation that takes care of long-term storage to make that safety, that long-term stability make sense, right? And to be fair, we kind of copied that from Alcor because I think it's actually a good model how they do it, and with a separate asset management, in our case called Patient Care Foundation. My push why we set out to be around, right? Is I would like to, over the next years, and I think we already have to some degree, increase the average quality of a cryopreservation more and more. Stability is great and important, but of course, quality is equally, if not more important. So everybody who signs up with us and then gets cryopreserved gets CT scanned, right? So you can see in all of our case reports, there's always CT scans showing that the perfusion, that enough cryoprotective agent got into the brain. And then, since recently, we have now collected consent from people to take spinal cord and or brain samples to do electron microscopy. We've done one. We will probably do a second one soon. And then, on average, right now, 40% of our people who sign up with us give us a consent. So in the end, judge us by the quality. You know, just look at quality, how quality gets better over time, and then look at stability. I wrote an article about what you should look at to compare cryopreservation organizations, like nine high-level points, and I think this is what everybody should do: compare and then make a call.
Okay.
Yeah, we kicked off.
If you're a pet,
yeah, if you have a pet, yeah, we have everything you could imagine. That we've had everything show up. We sometimes say that we're the Noah's Ark, because of course we have cats and dogs that want to be cryopreserved, but we also have horses, we have tarantulas, we have frogs, we have everything you can possibly imagine. But yeah, I mean, we kicked off Cryopets in 2023 for 2 main reasons. Number one is I have a 14-year-old cat who I'm very fond of, and I will definitely move mountains to save that cat. And number 2, we really believe that pets are the gateway drug to human cryopreservation. And appreciate it. And when we, at least in the U.S., when we did our initial market research. I wanted to see if I was the only one who was crazy enough to want to freeze his cat. Luckily, I wasn't. And we found that people were much more willing to cryopreserve their pets than themselves. And in fact, the vast majority of people who want to cryopreserve their pets don't actually want to be cryopreserved themselves, at least not yet. And it has been cool to see because we have some people who, sort of sign up their dog and talk with us about it, and then they start thinking like, by the way, do you guys do humans as well? And then, we'll usually say go talk to Emil or otherwise. So that was really why we kicked off Cryopets. I think we've learned a lot so far. I mean, even though the vast majority of who signs up with us is actually dog owners, I think it's 60 or 70%. Dogs there's so many variations of dogs even. So there's so many different breeds. There's different shapes of their chests. There's different ways that we have to sort of modify this procedure. And so we're learning a lot, and I think we'll continue to learn a lot. And my hope is that in the coming years we will have sort of the most experience by far on all these different types of pets. And so yeah, if you have pets, then definitely come and talk to us. And we're based in Texas. We're building our first ambulances now, and yeah, hope to expand coverage from there. But yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica from Nectome, and so we're doing chemical preservation. So our founder Aurelia originally developed aldehyde stabilized cryopreservation, and what we're trying to do is the highest quality preservation that it's possible to do in the world today. So what that means for us is it's got to be a non-emergency planned procedure. You have to be diagnosed terminal and able to take advantage of the medical aid in dying laws on site in Oregon, where we're currently based, although eventually we plan to expand to larger regions. Anybody can come to Oregon, so it's a very good spot for that, even internationally. And so what we're trying to do essentially is preserve comprehensively the entire brain, and it's always a whole body preservation for us. And so I want to throw out there the proposal for all of you here in this audience that if you believe that cryopreservation in the traditional case is reversible, you should also believe by the same evidence that fixation, chemical fixation, is reversible. And I'd love to discuss this further with anybody who's interested.
We'll definitely be getting to that throughout the day in various ways. I would like to start this off by asking a question of everyone on the panel who have an opinion on this, which I suspect is everyone, to make a prediction of how the industry is going to look different in 10 years, and barring some kind of fast takeoff AI thing, let's just put that to the side. But how will the industry look different in 10 years? And how will your organization have contributed to that way in which the industry looks different in 10 years? So whoever wants to take it in whichever order.
Maybe I'll kick things off a little bit from the pet side. Yeah, a lot of our goal in starting Cryopets is I like to think about what I want the future to look like in 10 years. My parents are going to be much older in 10 years. My grandparents are probably not going to be around. And I've always kind of framed these things of the people I care about and the pets that I care about. How can I put my effort into ways to kind of save them in order of how much time they have left? And what I'd love to see is for my father, who lives in the middle of nowhere, Utah, that when he is legally dead, right? That there is a hospital nearby that, at least in some capacity, works with cryopreservation. Best case scenario would be that this is sort of directly involved, but even being quite cooperative and having a lot of these resources nearby will be very helpful. So I like to kind of try to see what we can do to make these things happen. Part of what I think Cryopets can do specifically is get cryopreservation directly involved in veterinary hospitals, and this is sort of the first step to getting more involved in human hospitals. A lot of our early talks with veterinarians have been very, very positive. They're quite open to implementing things into their practice, and of course there's a lot less regulation and red tape that we have to get through to do those things. So I think I can see as the science gets better, as we put cryopreservation on the map more, I think we'll see this kind of get directly involved with the medical field, and hopefully we can have these options available to people at scale. And I think that's really where Cryopets comes in. And then I'll just make one more note. I think cryopreservation is going to be cool, for lack of a better word. I think it's going to be cool. I think it's not going to be this weird fringe thing. A lot of what we will try to do over the coming years is make it cool. And I want Twitch streamers talking about cryopreserving their pets. I want YouTubers cryopreserving their pets. I want their fans and their viewers going and begging their parents to cryopreserve their cat and dog. I think this is really where we can shine, and where we've done work in the past. So.
I love that. I want more of that. That's exactly what we need to do. I think the industry at large has sort of had a communication problem with the outside world, and a lot of that is maybe an artifact of where we've come from and the sort of origins and the culture that this community grew up in. But I think it's a very different world now than it was even a few years ago. We used to talk to people, in 2018, and we got a certain kind of response from them. And now we talk to them today, and it's a very different kind of response. And I think we haven't updated collectively about what the world might be willing to accept. And it may well actually be possible to make this into something that is not only commonly accepted, but strongly desired by the general public.
Anyone else want to offer any predictions?
So from a communication and public awareness standpoint, so what we're trying to advocate for, and I said it kind of in my talk on the first day here, is there's a tremendous amount of people, if you ask them in studies, they say cryopreservation makes sense to me, I should do it. Like 20% of population, depending on how you ask and so on. And then everybody, of course, we're well aware, still gets cremated or buried at the end. So basically, from our communication standpoint, we're working towards pushing people, in quotation marks, to make that a conscious decision. To at some point in their life say, yes, I would like to be cremated or buried. Or do the alternative, right? But of course, most people currently don't make it a conscious decision. It's just like, they go the path of, least resistance, I guess. So that, I think, hopefully in 10 years, significantly more people at the age of 60, 70, 80, or even earlier than that, make it a conscious decision to decide pro or against cryopreservation. And then for those who decide pro, of course, hopefully, they then know one of the organizations here. From a scientific perspective, I think in 10 years, hopefully at that point we have significantly more data that organs can be preserved and actually get transplanted, right? Maybe some mammal can be cryopreserved, maybe not to cryogenic temperatures yet, but significantly lower than currently possible, to kind of do this aha moment for the general population. I said it many times, for me the only aha moment that really works is a mammal, be it a rat or a mouse, gets cryopreserved, it was dead, and now it lives again, right? So maybe 10 years, maybe that's a bit short notice, but fingers crossed. From a human perspective, hopefully in 10 years the top cryopreservation has perfect ultrastructural preservation. I don't think we will see any reversibility at that point. And then the average cryopreservation should be significantly closer to a top of the line cryopreservation. So from a logistics standpoint, right? From where people are picked up, how do we handle, and all of these things, of course, we're working on, how to handle non-ideal cases with some amount of ischemia, right? How we rescue ischemia and so on. So I think these 4 things or so are the ones that we're probably going to focus on over the next 10 years.
From a scientific point of view, the hardest part of this is the perfusion is never very good. And I don't see us overcoming that very quickly. And that's, so I don't think the quality is going to go up dramatically. The reason that we're expanding so much isn't to serve this huge demand of people. It's because it's a form of advertising. It's a marketing strategy to get people in those cities on board with what we're doing. So that's about all I had.
Okay, so I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. We're all commonalities of interest here. So let me specify Alcor. So Alcor in 10 years, what we're trying to achieve, I think we've done a lot in a couple of years. This is a logistics game, by the way. For anybody who's confused about that, and he's got an approach, we have an approach. But you can have the best scientists in the world, the best CPA, the best chemical fixation. If you don't get the body in time, it doesn't do you any good. You know, doesn't get the brain in time. So to me, that's a starting point. But I think we have multiple solutions, and we're watching as they progress to, you know, see who's doing well or what form. And we'll probably adopt each other's methods in some way or another on the better side, hopefully. So that's that. But Alcor, to one of the points here, the messaging, and it's funny because I'm sitting here, and 3 years ago, I remember, I might have been on this stage, but I was talking about messaging. It's shaping the message to the public. We don't need to shape the message to cryonicists. They already know, they understand the science. And I was, I think, in part brought in by, we have a board member here, we have, you know, members and patients, the representatives of patients here and everybody else, and you guys have seen a dramatic change in the messaging, and we're starting to see fruit. But in 10 years, we're gonna see some real fruit. Okay, there's some big messaging initiatives in the mainstream that'll be announced hopefully in the next 6 months to a year. But even before that, you know, Alcor, we've taken a new focus. So we're leaving here, we're going to UCSD. That's a prominent school, University of California school. We were invited to speak there. That is unheard of 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Why? Because we've even brought on people whose task is to reach out to future thought leaders. Not the thought leaders today that already have biases, but young people who, you know, we talk about mechanical engineering, we're talking about the science, we're not talking about, you know, the aspirational science fiction, we're talking about things they can touch, things that they can get a job in, you know? And so they're hearing about it from a different perspective, and that's filtering through to their families and to whatever, but we're also looking at medical schools. So Alcor's actually building out a robust platform for thought leaders outside of cryonics to hear about cryonics. And to give you a real world example, in the last few cases we have had almost direct hospital access, which is unheard of. Right, but that means patients, our team is getting there, they're letting us on the floor. They're letting us take gear up. That never happened. You know, for years I had to deal with hospital administrations and lawyers, teams of lawyers, where we were fighting. We haven't dealt with that in 6 months to a year. So we're seeing fruits, but I think in 10 years it will be a dramatic change if we have our way, if we're successful. Because that's when those 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds starting companies and making revenue and being thought leaders. So that's our goal.
So even highly competitive industries have things like trade groups, consortiums, ways to pool their resources together when there's something that's being done that affects all players within that industry. Lobbying is an obvious one, but marketing might be another one, right? The Got Milk campaign, right? That was a bunch of dairy farmers got together for their common good. But I'm sure there are others. So cryonics is, I would say, lacking in that department. Is this a structural problem? Is this is this something that should be solved? And what might be the lowest hanging fruit to an endeavor of that sort existing within this industry?
I think in legal terms it's a ripeness issue, meaning the issue has to mature to a certain degree, and we have some startups here, we have some 5 years and whatever. And so, you know, at some point in the next 5 years, some of this will shake out. It's kind of becoming prominent, so a lot of people are jumping. By the way, we represent a portion now. There's like multiple cryo entities popping up. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I'm tracking it, and there's probably 12 or 15 now, you know, besides us. And they're small, and yeah, I know, Emil, I know, that's what I'm saying. But, you know, you've got to see that shake out, and like, who's going to survive the first 3 years? They think they're getting these checks for 200 grand or whatever. And it's just obviously we know this doesn't work that way, right? This is a labor of love for a long time. So I think on the regulatory side, and I worked on K Street as an attorney. I mean, I've done this. I think we probably will have a consortium, but it'll probably have to wait till it shakes out a little bit. Meaning, you know, there probably will be an attack politically at some point. All right, are we prepared for that? How are we going to address that? And then, you know, we have different places. I mean, Europe is secular in a lot of ways, very different. So that political regulatory attack is going to be different than the US perhaps. So there's a lot of layers to the onion. And I'm sure, you know, look, as much as we compete and whatever, certainly, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing, right? So we know this, like, we're not stupid. We're pros up here. We're going to get it. And I think there probably will be a consortium and hopefully a Got Cryo commercial or something. So.
Sorry, no, I don't think any group effort would work.
I'm okay with that too. We're both sitting in the sun for a reason. Same psychology, sir.
Captain Planet over there, you're gonna, get your powers.
Yeah, I guess my response to this would be that it feels like within the cryo community there's a lot of competition, energy. Maybe not necessarily true competition, but it feels like we're competing in a way that is maybe unnecessary. I'd like ideally to build bridges, come to a common understanding, see if we can come together as a community to the extent that we're able.
Hear, hear.
Sorry, I meant not no because we're competitive. I would love to work with all of these people. I meant no, just I don't think it would serve any purpose. That's all.
And to your point, to your, yeah, right now it's not ripe. I don't think it's ripe to put money into that. It doesn't make sense, perhaps. But to your point, the competitiveness you're sensing, I think, too, in fairness, I don't want this to become bum fights. I don't want us all fighting over scraps here. Let's go after the bigger, broader market, and we can all coexist. Like, that's the right plan. But we are going to have differences of opinion on how to do it. And then you give stratification of the market. Somebody wants a pickup truck, somebody wants a sedan, somebody wants a sports car. Let them pick. I have no problem with fair and open competition. None.
And I'll just quickly say, to quote Peter Thiel, one of our investors, I think competition is for losers. And yeah, but we're always happy to, we collaborate quite a bit with Tomorrow Bio, and when we build Cryopets, I sort of don't look at any of the other organizations and what they're doing. To be honest, we play our game. We try to make it the best we can. So.
No, I think absolutely there should be way more collaboration. And as you said, we do stuff together. We're talking about doing stuff together. We publish papers together, like at least with Andy and so on, right? There should be much more things, and I've been trying to kind of push that narrative as well, like to do stuff together, right? It doesn't need to be like tremendously big things, but at least starting to work together and see how that goes. Yeah.
I noticed a couple of hands out in the audience, but remember, we will have time for the Q&A for everybody on this panel in bays later in the day. Any further thoughts on this question before I press on? So right now, we were just talking about, I guess a lot of people up here are in accordance with what the industry doesn't need at the moment. So what does the industry need at the moment? And the easy answer is money and people. Okay, yeah, we know money and people. Anything besides money and people? Like, would you like to see, some company spring up that is able to manufacture doers at a much lower price and sort of sells to each player in the industry, and there's economies of scale in that way? Or what are other kind of wins that could or should exist in that regard?
Yeah, I think the highest impact thing is figuring out how we communicate this topic of cryopreservation or preservation in general, so that the amount of people who sign up moves even slightly closer to the amount of people that say they should sign up or want to sign up. Again, if you ask people, does cryopreservation make sense, and this is one of your end-of-life choices or even the end-of-life choice, 20% of population says, yes, this is my end-of-life choice. Right? And of course, everybody's well aware that we're not even on the same order of magnitude of people actually signing up. So there is some disconnect about how people make decisions about this. So I think that the biggest impact in the, maybe not short term, but in the next 10 years or so, would be trying to figure out how to do that.
I think the biggest impact is going to come from industries that aren't even related to us. Like, I think AI was a big boost. I think longevity is going to be a boost. And then also, when we start seeing organisms get uploaded in 10, 20, 30 years, I think that will boost interest in what we're doing.
I guess the mic's here. I was going to say real quick. I think cultural adoption, and it'll probably take a few big names that become public at some point. That'll be a big one, right, for growth for everybody. And then proper shaping of the messaging related to that, which is going to be patient families that come back and say, hey, they did a great job. Or, Emil, they were there when we needed them. There's a part of this and I've been meeting with a lot of funeral directors, there's a big touch point here that I think we've missed as scientist type people about the families and the touch points with the families and the sensitivity of that. And we're actually working on a memorial garden at Alcor now. We're rebuilding the whole space, redoing the lab and everything. That's a big thing that's going on. And there'll be actually funeral directors advising on how to make that space for the families, because it is a destination now. Think about it. Every person that comes there to visit their family member, you get 4 people, 5 people. And one bad impression takes 5 to 10 positive impressions to undo, right? So one good impression, that's worth 5 bad ones. So we're trying to have every touch point be positive, and we're not there yet. We need to do better.
I mean, maybe I'll just quickly say that I think one of the things that we will add to the space, or at least help add to the space, is we really want to prove that cryonics is venture backable. And this is it's a tricky problem. It's one that we set out to solve. And we have a pretty good start. I mean, we don't just have random small checks from the same people. I mean, we have some of the best investors in the world, billionaires that are backing our company. So, I think once we do that, it will significantly de-risk the space, and then we'll see a lot more money flow in. And of course, some of that money will go to us. Some of it will go to the other people here. Some of it will go to many new startups that blossom in the space. That's what I'd like to see. I think we need a lot more. We need a lot more.
So one thing that I think we might be missing in the industry at large is sort of a shared definition for what good quality looks like. Right now, it seems like everyone's saying different things about what it would take to do a really good preservation. And Mike Darwin says that we have a no feedback problem in the industry, where if you preserve somebody and you can't get them back for 100 years or more, and there's no way to check into what quality has happened there, how do you know it was done well? How do you know it was done at all, right? And so I think that if we could come together as an industry and a community around some shared values about what is a quality preservation, I think that will go a long way for communicating with the scientific community and ultimately communicating with the public as well, because they'll have some sense of what it is they're getting and what it is that the offerings provide relative to each other.
I want to pull on that thread. Do you think that if we had better indications of the cryopreservation viability or quality, et cetera, that would result in more of this VC-backed money coming into the industry?
Absolutely.
So that's maybe what we need, or what else would we need to get more funding from large players, whether it's venture capital or any other significant source?
I mean, I have a couple of thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them I think is just simply profits. Do we make any money? I hate to say it, but the industry, the VC industry, is largely driven on profits. So it's one of those things that if the more adoption we can get, the more traction we can get with the general public, the more likely it will be to fund these sorts of things in general.
Right, so I think directionally we agree on how on the quality side. Like, I think electron microscopy needs to be done. If you don't have consent for electron microscopy, at least CT scans need to be done. Profits, I strongly disagree. I think until we have established quality metrics, we should not make profit from cryopreservations. We can make profit from adjacent services, but from cryopreservations there should not be profit, right? Because otherwise an organization would be incentivized to spend less on a cryopreservation because, well, there are no established metrics, so who can say anything, right, to increase the profit, right?
But if you have metrics, then you can measure it.
Established generally agreed upon metrics.
Sure.
Yeah. So once we have that, once we're like a hospital where there's a certain amount of you do an operation and then there's a rehospitalization rate that you want to bring down, right, or disease-free survival or anything like that. Once there's something even akin to that, I think then you can say, well, we can do that type of quality, but we can do it more affordably. But honestly, I think unfortunately to that level that's gonna be a long time in the future, because I would argue organizations, we should always, even once we have gotten to whatever quality level we have agreed on, let's say that is now the standard, then we should think about, until revival is possible, what is the next level that we could now go to, right? So unfortunately, I think until revival is actually possible, there should not be profit made from the cryopreservation cost, right? Adjacent services, membership fees, whatever, insurance fees, whatever, that I think is all fine, but not from the cryopreservation cost.
I wanted to pull in a different thread that, Jordan, you actually mentioned earlier. So you said that longevity was kind of a stimulant for cryonics. And I've heard people argue against that in the following way, that the more excited they get about the possibility for life extension and longevity technologies, the less they feel that there's going to be a need for any kind of end of life, quote, end of life solution. So how would you respond to that, or do you feel like that's in accordance with what you're saying?
Well, there currently aren't any longevity strategies other than diet, exercise, and sleep. That's really about it. So I think once it actually happens, I think things will change.
So does that mean
I think once you see people living 20 years longer, they're going to have they're going to be thinking longer term, and it's going to affect everybody's psychology. It's going to be a huge change in our society.
So, but a lot of people go on this kind of, I'll call it a hype cycle. So the more people are hyped about longevity itself seeming to be on the edge of whatever new revolution.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not, I agree with you. But a lot of people seem to think it is. And they, to the extent that they are influenced in believing that, they may be less interested in the alternatives. So does that mean that there's kind of a trade-off between the two?
We'll see what happens when there's actual longevity treatments available. I think it'll be dramatic.
Let's talk about an example. I was at Founders Fund. I was at their offices. It's a big, big VC in Miami, and I was with some other Teal fellows and a number of investors and so on. And the topic of curing aging and longevity came up, and it was just I stayed quiet at first. I was interested in what the table had to say. A lot of these people weren't directly working on this at all. And after a couple minutes of them discussing, they all kind of agreed that longevity was pretty much a solved problem, and we got this in the next couple of years. And I was sitting there, and I was just like, "What the hell is going on? Like, this is they've been so convinced by the hype in this field that they came to the conclusion that it wasn't even worth joining in and helping because this was such a solved problem." I think this hype in the field is it can be quite it can be quite damaging. And I'm looking around, like every single one of you is going to need to be in one of our doers, and unless we make some very, very radical changes, and the fact that they don't understand that is pretty worrying. So it's just worth noting.
We know that there's a significant distinction on this stage between, let's call it the traditional cryopreservation methods and the chemical preservation methods. How do the traditional cryonics organizations on this stage feel about the prospects of at some point integrating the chemical preservation in any way, shape, or form in one of the two ways that we see on this stage, or in some other way in the future? Is there something you would need to see that would make you convinced that it's at least an option to offer alongside the situation, or what would change your mind?
I mean, that point is a few years ago for us. So we've been doing combined immersion vitrifixation, which is a combination of chemical fixation and cryoprotection under certain circumstances, and we've done that for a long time, right? So our thesis is that depending on the condition, like how much ischemia and the individual situation, you might go for one or another approach, right? So under medium to high amounts of ischemia, we go for immersion vitrifixation, because basically you cannot perfuse with cryoprotective agent at that point anymore, right? So you can do straight freeze, or you can do immersion vitrifixation. I think we might differ under which conditions, what approach is the best under which conditions, but fundamentally, I think both make sense under certain conditions.
Yeah, we're not actively, collaborating per se, but that's what these conferences are about. We might be. And I know, like, my membership department, they've been told if somebody is interested in chemical fixation to direct them to the organizations that do that. We don't have any fundamental opposition to it. In fact, one of my board members here is here, and he's big on the digital self, right? And my understanding with the chemical fixation is the possibility of brain mapping and digital self resulting from that. And, you know, reasonable minds can disagree on what you want, right? You can reasonably want a pickup truck, and I can reasonably want a sports car. And they're different. They do different things, different ways and modalities, and none of us actually know which one's better. We can theorize about it, and Ralph will argue all day long there's going to be a digital self and an AI version, but, you know, I want my biological self, and one might be easier to unwrap than the other, and I know that because I talk to world-famous cryobiologists all the time, and they tell me this one's harder to do this, and this one's, you know, harder to do this with. So it's okay. Again, bum fights. There's no point in me debating it or arguing or trying to interfere. If people want chemical fixation, they've done their homework, here's a phone number. Talk to them. They're the best in the world, you know? And if you want to do it our way, the traditional way, cool. We're right here. I mean, that's how I look at it. And I think we've tried to execute that. I mean, we see some heads nodding there. We've tried. We're trying. We're trying to be fair on that because I don't see them as competitors. I see them as, I don't make pickup trucks at all. So if you want a pickup truck, go to the people who make the best pickup truck. It's easy, folks.
Yeah, honestly, I've thought a lot about this stuff. I mean, it honestly worries me quite a bit. I try to not be too confident about anything, especially in the field that we're in. Things are changing all the time, new research, and I try to always keep an open mind. You know, I had a talk yesterday where I talked about transhumanism and sort of some of the changes that were made, and identity became kind of abstract, and I think part of this field was also, you know, earlier on in the 2010s when I was introduced, you know, to a lot of this stuff, or let's say even, you know, maybe post ASC, which was, I don't know, 2016. I do know that a lot of people that were quite excited about this technology were the mind uploader people, right? And you know, when I talked to them early on, some of their goals were, you know, they were basically saying we're going to go to these, you know, we're going to go to these old people homes and convince them to upload their minds. And you know, I'm generally pretty worried about the mind uploading aspect of things. I think it could just be, you know, a very fancy way to kill yourself and then have a clone, or even if everyone gets on board with it, it's just like our own invented great filter, and we just, humanity's extinct now, but you know, we have the metaverse clones that are walking around and you know, pretending to be us. So I'm generally pretty worried about this stuff. I think as this field has evolved and fixation has evolved and other organizations have popped up, I think I would say even in the past year or two, they've, you know, there's been this change in narrative where it's like, maybe we won't convince the old people to upload their minds, but instead we're actually going to, you know, push more that, you know, this could also be reversible at some point. And I would need to be more convinced of that, I think, to get on board. But ultimately, as you know, I never, of course, if someone is interested in that, I would always give them, you know, Nectome's number or Sparks' number or otherwise. You know, I of course would point them in the right direction. But it's at least not something that we're considering doing anytime soon at Cryopets for the pets. And yeah.
So a lot of people have, a lot of cryo organizations have worried in the past about things like tornado risk or earthquakes or, you know, various other calamities of that sort. But I think we can all agree that perhaps the biggest potential problems facing any facility that's storing patients at this stage is not environmental, it's political. So I would love to hear from each of the orgs whether do they agree? Do they think that politics can change the situation for them, their facility, their patients, their operations fairly quickly? What kind of risks does that pose, and how are they actively or in the future looking to mitigate that risk?
So Oregon started requiring licenses to accept bodies for donation to science. So we got licensed as Narrow, is what it's called, Narro. And once the state grants a license, they don't typically take it away. They'll grandfather you in, so we're good. It's not a problem.
Sure. Over short periods of time. I mean, it's Switzerland. It's a very liberal country, right, with a strong rule of law. But of course, you never know, right? 50 years in the future, laws change, and who knows? So over long periods of time, at least, I think in Switzerland, it's politically there's a higher risk than tornadoes. I'm not aware of any tornadoes in Switzerland, at least where we are, nor floods or hurricanes or anything of the like. So our approach is that I think to be really safe over long periods of time, you need geopolitical risk mitigation. Our approach to this is, so we just a year ago or something like that, we formed a backup agreement with Southern Cryonics, right, where it says basically, if anything goes wrong in Australia under certain conditions and with our collaboration and agreement, of course, they can relocate their bodies to us and vice versa. Right. Sometimes on the horizon, we're going to have other storage locations, probably the next one in the US, to have that mitigation, right? And then worst case, if something goes wrong in your country, you need to move. Of course, fingers crossed, that's many decades in the future, but I think you need to prepare to make that possible when it and should it come, because it's not something that you can do last minute. And I think at the very least, when we come back to this topic of collaboration, I think it makes absolute sense if all organizations would say, listen, if there's a risk to patients, we pre-agree that we're going to work together to save those patients, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be like here's a written agreement with 500 pages and pre-agreed prices, but like at least a memorandum of understanding that we're going to work together. And this we started with Southern Cryonics, and I think it would be great if others would also join.
Just to echo that, I think that's a really great idea, and we should definitely have kind of a collective backup plan to lean on each other if it comes up to it, if it's useful or necessary. From the Nectome perspective, I guess we're a little more robust on the storage side because we can rewarm to room temperature for years, even if you need potentially, and so that helps a bit. But I think the most important thing is maybe not to have the geopolitical problem in the first place, if we can avoid it. And this is maybe a messaging question. Depending on how we talk about this, we may or may not get certain groups interested or aligned with us. And I think that takes some kind of strategic discussion that might be worth having.
Well, from the Alcor perspective, we're aware of the problem. I think keenly aware of the problem. That is some of my background. The good news is, Alcor's depth of membership is deep, and it's very, very strong, which means that I think we have what I call air cover at the highest political levels based on our membership. Okay? So that buys us time. It's an imperfect protection, but to your point, try not to get there in the first place. And politics is relationships. Literally. It's not quantifiable, so the math quants out here are going to get pissed, but that's talking to people. That's face-to-face. That's what I do. And I think we're pretty good at it now. But also, all politics is local. So even if you have a federal edict that comes out, which I am, I'd say there's 0 to 5% on, you still can get time on the local side. Well, then it becomes a logistical issue. Where do you go? How do you get there? And really, it's patience. If you're a member, you're going to have to figure it out where you live. But if you're a patient, we need to be in a position to quickly extricate. And that requires, some very professionally experienced people in extrication of human bodies. And fortunately, Alcor's got a pretty deep team in that way. So we've thought about it, and there are active contingency plans, game theory, game planning for this. Industry collaboration at some point. We're not there yet, but I do think that'll help too. But our membership's strong.
Yeah, and then from the pet world, I'll just say, we have very little worry about many of these things. I think humans sort of pose a much greater risk than pets. You can crop preserve a deer in your garage and get some deer jerky every so often. I mean, no one really cares actually when it comes down to it. I mean, so where we do storage in Texas, I mean, we we've talked to the county, and we've talked to the fire marshals, and we've had them come to the facility and so on, and so there's it's not that we're doing anything kind of secretive and hoping that they don't add anything later. I mean, they all just think it's kind of funny and cool, and I would say something to think about as well. Like with that in mind, there could even be an argument, and maybe something for the other organizations to think about, or and for us to think about is I think humans pose a much greater legal risk than pets, and it may even make sense to separate the humans and the pets legally or otherwise, even if it's just different side of the warehouse, because I think actually when we store humans and pets too closely, it could actually pose a much greater risk to the pet patients, just because human cases are maybe will be a bit more scrutinized in the future. Just something to think about.
All right, we will leave it there for the next panel. So thank you, everybody, and all of these individuals will be back to answer your questions rather than just mine soon enough this afternoon in Bays, along with all the rest of our programming. But we have one more important thing coming up right here on the main stage right now. So stay tuned.